are your learning styles? And do different areas of your life demand different learning styles? Hello, and today's insight is going to be about this specific topic, our learning styles, right? And how to utilize them, because I had a conversation with some ladies at church on Saturday, and they were talking about how it is crucial to validate everything, like every information that you receive, to see that if it's from God, right? And not from Satan. And it's interesting because I've always been one to trust my intuition and to follow what my intuition told me, even when it would take me down a wrong path. Now, I do understand how some people see that as good or bad, but in actuality, like, learning is all experiential. So anything that your intuition tells you to do, in my mind, all right, is for you to grow and expand. Now, yes, of course, there are some things that could be seen as bad. For example, at some point, I was involved with a man that really didn't want to see things through with me, didn't want to really get to know me better, and so on and so forth, right? And that, in my mind, was God's way of teaching me what is acceptable and what is not. What will I accept from a relationship and what I won't? Because I've never actually been in a serious relationship, so I always had this very romantic sight of it. But because of that, and because of the heartbreak that followed, I learned things that I might not have learned if I had followed that specific idea, which is validate if it is from God, right? So I did a little bit of research, and I found that there's like 4 learning styles. So there's experiential learning styles, there's an auditory learning style, there's a kinesthetic learning style, and well, I said experiential, but in actuality, it's auditory, kinesthetic, and read and write. I added experiential. In any way, so the way I see it, well, actually, I think experiential is kinesthetic. You learn by doing, right? There's also a visual learning style. So people like to see images, graphs, things of that nature. Okay, and depending on what I'm involved in or what I'm learning, the learning style will change. So a lot of the things, like in my love life, okay, it's experiential, or should I say kinesthetic. Like, I learn by making mistakes. That's what I mean, all right? In history, I used to be very auditory, very auditory. So whatever the teacher said, I would just blurt it back out like a parrot, right? And visual, I'm for example, now after my accident, and even before, okay, so I would remember people's faces mainly, but before I would not only remember their faces, but I also remember the name that went with it. But now, probably because some of my neural pathways were kind of bothered, or shook, if you could say, I now am less, I remember less their names, and I need to be more experiential, meaning I need to repeat it, find ways to remember the names. But I'll absolutely remember a face, right? And reading and writing is mainly how I used to do it in university. I would write down notes from class. I would tape record the entire class and write down notes and all that stuff. And that's how I did that. That's how I got to achieve my bachelor's degree in communication and human relations. So that's for that. But the thing I want to mention here is that, the lady said you need to validate with God, but I also mentioned that, that instead is right, it's good, and my perception on that is that it's good. But the reason why I brought learning styles into this conversation is because, this video, is because depending on what situation you find yourself in, your learning style will be different. And like I mentioned, my learning styles in different situations vary. Okay? Like for school, my best learning style, at least in university, was reading, writing, and like rewriting. So I would like write down my notes and just copy them multiple times. And for some, that was it. There wasn't, it wasn't really copying, like rewriting my notes multiple times. It was more like writing them down once. And because I'm more auditory, but because I linked two things together. So I listened, but I also took notes. So it's like, it's you're searing it in your mind when you do that. And I know one of my classmates was only like, she would write, so she was kinesthetic, and she would write down the entire text multiple times, I think, in either case. So everyone has their learning style, and that's how they assimilate information, right? So as much as it is important to know how you learn, it is also important to know how you learn in regards to life experiences, because God won't necessarily give you a specific way of learning things, right? He'll just give you life experiences, and it is up to you to match your learning style to the life experience. So if, let's say, you are more of a kinesthetic type of individual in regards to different areas, but if the kinesthetic learning is your main way of learning information, you should have the life experiences and then go down and write a journal and like meditate on them, right? I don't necessarily what I did in regards to life experiences, okay? You never know how the information is going to come, but then what I did, okay, is that after my accident, I became impulsive. And the way my father told me, or the trick my father gave me to manage my impulsiveness, was he told me to do, at least he started this way. He said, write down what happened. I did that. And then he said, write down like the situation, which I did. And then he told me, write down things that you thought would lead up to what occurred, right? For what caused you to react a certain way, which I did. And then the fourth step was like, okay, if you got all that, now just think of ways that you can manage yourself so that the next time you find yourself in a similar situation, you know how to overcome the situation, not be impulsive as such. And so that is very university level type learning, which is experiential, and everybody kind of does it unknowingly, but for those of you who haven't necessarily done this type of like cognitive exercise in regards to life experiences, then I definitely suggest it, and especially when I had my accident, the fact that when I was impulsive after my accident, it wasn't really, I didn't really think, or I didn't even wait to like think about what was happening. I would just do it. It's an impulse is something you just do because you get the inkling of doing it, right? It's a very animalistic way of being. Now, that's not good or bad. That just is. Okay, but the fact that the day where I was able to stop myself before doing the idea that came to mind was like a pivotal turning point for me. So what I mean is that at some point there is this balance that is created within you, because one of my coaches, Yann Lajoie, he was talking today. I listened to a video of his which talked of the fact that utilizing your intuition is important, but you need to also be how should I say it, you also need to be very methodical in what you do, because just doing things your intuition tells you to do is not necessarily going to lead you to your end result. Of course, it's going to help you grow and expand, but not necessarily in the way you want to grow and expand. And so in those cases, it's best that you take a moment and be like, okay, so what would be best? For example, in life, you need to think twice, right? But in sports, where it's a much more you need to act in the moment type of situation, you need to absolutely act right now. That is more in regards to a gut feeling, or in regards to your intuition that happens in the moment, and then you just live with the consequences, right, of that said action or that said choice. And so as much as your intuition is important, you also need to be able to balance that out with some critical thinking, if you will, and you learning from experience. Because if you don't learn from your experiences and you just keep repeating the same mistake over and over again, well, that's kind of called insanity to my knowledge. But also, it's also a sign that you're not learning from your past experiences, which is ultimately what we all need to do. Because if we don't learn, we continually make the same mistake, and if we continually make the same mistake, we won't go anywhere outside of the current reality we find ourselves in. And that brings me to Christopher Duncan, who talks a lot about your current reality and your desired reality, and what you can do to achieve your desired reality, which is you're going to have to adopt a whole another thinking pattern. Because when you are in the pendulum state, as Christopher Duncan says, it is you get good things and then you get bad things, because of the fact that you are doing you're kind of learning through experience, if you will, which isn't bad in and of itself. But the issue happens is when you continually make the same mistakes, you don't learn from what needs to happen or what needs to be done. I hope that makes sense. Because ultimately, you make a mistake and you try to minimize it to once. Once or twice, it's okay. Have you heard the saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me? Kind of like that. You want to learn your lesson quick enough to be able to overcome the issue and move past it. So that is why I'm saying that knowing how you learn best will be optimal for you, because that way you can utilize everything necessary so you can avoid making the same mistake twice, and be able to jump through a lot of difficulties that might come up. So siren. In any case, I don't know if you guys hear it, but I hear it. In any case, how do you learn? And how can you utilize to your benefit? Let me know.